Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Peace and Justice Cafe here at the beautiful Humanity Hub. I'm not in the middle of a jungle. I'm actually at the Humanity Hub here in Den Haag. The sun is shining a little bit. It's mostly gray, but there's a little bit of sun up there. And of course, sadly, the room is a bit empty, but in a way, I can see so many of you here. As I said, it feels like you guys are right with me. So I'm so happy to have you here at the Peace and Justice Cafe. We're going to get started right away. One of the purposes of this event is to what we call touch base in a shifting world. And one of the things touching base can mean is reconnecting. And so we're going to do something that we did here in February at the NGO reception at the Humanity Hub. We're going to toss everybody right away into randomly decided breakout groups. Now, this sounds really chaotic, but trust me, this is a really interesting way to very quickly have a chance for you to speak, for you to connect with people, and for you maybe to meet somebody new. So my friend Lotte is going to randomly divide everybody on this call into breakout rooms of 3 people. So open your video, unmute your mic when you get into the breakout room, and see who's there with you. Find out who they are, what they're doing. My challenge to you is try to find out something interesting about both of the other people in your breakout rooms. So you have 15 minutes. Try and meet the people in your breakout rooms. You're going to see something pop up on your screen in just a second that says, join now. So here we go, 15 minutes, find out something interesting, and then we'll come back. So click join now when it pops up on your screen. So thanks, everybody. I hope that you had a really interesting conversation with the 2 people that you got randomly put with. But I have a big screen of all of your faces right here on the left. So can I do this because I'm in desperate need of social interaction? Can all of you give a big wave? And you can go to switch to gallery view and say, hi, everybody. Oh, wow, you guys are good at following directions. My goodness, this is great. Even some thumbs up. From those of you who have used Zoom way too much over these last 12 months, you're already on top of the features. Welcome to the Peace and Justice Cafe. The purpose of this event, for those of you who are here, by the way, I mentioned it earlier, we are joined by such a wide cross-cutting group of people from private sector, public sector. I would specifically like to welcome your excellencies that are joining us as well. Everybody from CEOs to diplomats to people around the world are joining us at this event, and we're really happy that you're here. So this event is about touching base in a shifting world. We're going to discuss together what the heck that means as we go through the event, but certainly one aspect of touching base is reconnecting, and I hope that you've had a chance to do that already with some people that you know, some people you don't know in our first networking event. Coming up very soon, we're going to hear from, we're here joined by many leaders from the Humanity Hub network and from the ecosystem of peace and justice here in The Hague, as well as from around the world. Next, we're going to hear from some leaders in the Humanity Hub network, here working on peace and justice in The Hague. And then we'll plug into the global conversation. What voices from around the world do we need to hear to understand what's going on around us as well, to get that perspective? So what we're going to do is we're going to do breakout rooms again, but this one is going to be a little bit less random, all right? Coming up on the screen in just a few seconds, you'll see 9 breakout rooms. Now, you have the ability to choose which one of these 9 breakout rooms you want to go to. And I've got to admit, I do not envy you because this is going to be a pretty tough choice. I'm hoping that if you're in speaker view on Zoom, you should be able to see these 9 rooms. So make sure that you're on speaker view and not gallery. That's if you go to the top right of your screen, if you're on a computer where it says view, you mouse over that and click on speaker view. You should see the list of these 9 breakout rooms. I hope I'm not disturbing you as you read them, because boy, as I read through these, I honestly do not know which one I would be able to choose. What our hope is that one of these 9 will really strike a chord with you. So take a minute to read them. A box will pop up on your screen in about 1 minute, and you'll have the ability to choose one of these 9. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. My hope is that session that you chose, I hope you chose a good one, and I hope it was interesting, engaging, give you a different perspective on how other people have spent this last year and how other organizations are coping with some of the challenges that we've all been facing. So welcome back. I think we're all back in the room now. Yeah, I can see about 90 plus of us, so I think we're all back. Thanks so much. We are joined here in the room. Finally, I've got a few other people to join us, and we're going to hear from them in just a little bit of time. But I just wanted to let you know I'm much less lonely now. So we have three brilliant and great personalities we're going to hear from in person. But before we do, we want to go to Payal Aurora with some key insights. What we wanted to do so far in this event was to make a one-on-one connection, a personal connection, or a one-on-two connection with those first networking sessions, to get a ecosystem, a community perspective by hearing from leaders in the Hague community. But we also want to tap into the global idea of what lessons do we need to learn from this global perspective? How can we tap into international perspectives on this last year? And for that, we turn to Payal Aurora. Payal's bio is getting posted in the chat, and I won't bore you by reading her CV for 2 minutes, but Payal is a digital anthropologist and professor and chair in technology value and global media cultures at Erasmus University, Rotterdam. Payal, you're very welcome. You have the floor. Can I just say to all of our attendees before we go to Payal, make sure you're on speaker view. That way you'll be able to see Payal. The last thing I would want is for you to get stuck with me on your screen. So switch to speaker view, and Payal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Connor, and hi, everyone. I really appreciate the format because I really got to talk to quite a few of you. So this is exciting. It doesn't normally work that way, isn't it? So yeah, let me plunge right into it. I would like to talk about the kinds of questions we ask, right? And why that matters. Now, just to give you a backdrop, because for me to pursue this, it's important to firstly recognize who we are, what are our vested interests, what drives us, right? And I basically am in three different, I wear multiple hats, and I'm in three different institutes. So I'm in the media studies, I'm in business school, and I'm in a philosophy school. And so you could say I'm an academic homeless person, or you could put a positive spin on it and say I'm actually liberated from the boundaries of home, right? And so that's been the story of my life, is basically I have always pursued something which is the opposite of the other once I started. So I started with doing my studies in policy, and I moved into my PhD in anthropology. So always macro and micro. And, when you go see my CV, it's all very cleaned up. And so the, unclean version of it is I am a college dropout in India, basically. I realized there's no hope for me, no future in India, and I left just in time when the Silicon Valley boomed out there, so I missed that one. And I moved to San Francisco believing I'm going to be this famous artist, muralist, and I became a waitress for years, supporting myself. So I landed up being a failed artist and a terrible waitress. Like, I was fired by 5 different restaurants, and I know all the Indian restaurants in San Francisco, that's for sure. I was given really appealing gigs, like I could sleep on the floor while in exchange, I was like, wow, good for us, community, Indian community and diasporas, right? So anyway, and then I moved to New York, and long story short, I stumbled into research. And it is about the opportunities that come your way, the exposure you get. And the reason I'm saying all this is that, I also became an art dealer because I was a field artist. I thought, well, it's close enough, right? So, I'm sure many of you, if you actually were honest with yourself, you have multiple interests. If you had to put the unclean CVs, you'd realize you're far more diverse. And that's another reason where we can find common grounds, because there's always a part of you that resonates with something or some aspect of a story or a narrative. So let me go into 3 questions which sprang from my experience across COVID. It starts off with literally a few weeks before the pandemic was declared a global emergency. Ironically, I was in India for the biggest science festival in the world, which was the India Science Festival, which was a public event. It attracted about 20,000 people, a lot of school kids. It was phenomenal event, where science was public and accessible and it was festivalized, right? And you had school children from public schools, private schools, all kinds. People could walk in, there's food stalls, and you had to pop science and energize them in a very sort of TED-like way, right? And I was put on the panel, and while these efforts were very, very commendable, what was disturbing was that out of about almost 70 speakers, there were only 5 women. And then I was put on an all-male panel except for myself, and the panel was called Why Science Needs Women. So I basically started by saying, I'm not answering that question, because then you'll have to, why don't you explain to me why public spaces then need women? Why do we need women at all, actually? The moment you start to rationalize something on those ends, that means there's a problem to begin with, but also it starts with false assumptions. We know there's a history of wiping women from the science narratives, that they have not been involved in the making of science and the making of knowledge production. And the question itself creates a fictional history, and we start at wrong points, right? So I remember actually at the panel saying, well, I'm not going to answer the question because it's the wrong question to begin with. And what was kind of crazy, I didn't think that was so controversial. I got a standing ovation amongst women in the audience, schoolgirls as young as 12. It was amazing, right? And then the guys had a very awkward time on the panel following up on this, right? So the whole thing was very awkward. But that was one event, right? So now let's bring it closer to home. Middle of last year, I was very excited because I've been in the Netherlands for about 12 years, I know, believe it or not. So I came here for a 1-year stint and then stuck. I don't know how these things happen, but it does. So I was given this opportunity to have a full page coverage in the Financial Times in the Netherlands, a full profile of myself, and it was so exciting. But what was interesting was the reason why that was is that the journalist was really concerned that a lot of businesses have been asking him the same question again and again, is how do we become truly local? And I was quite surprised. So he said, I've been following your work and you've been doing a lot of these because I talk to a lot of businesses and I talk a lot about global audiences, global users, the next billion users, which is my book, right? And so he said there is a huge panic in the Netherlands that, amongst businesses, amongst that, the whole donut economy, which is basically the circular economy, or if you guys don't know these terms, forget that. The idea is be local, let's be sustainable, let's be resilient, let's be, independent, is actually very dangerous to think so, because actually, as a mayor of Amsterdam says, we need to think global and act local. And I would actually contradict that. And I would say, no, actually, you've been acting globally, but thinking, and you've been thinking, globally, but acting locally, right? So meaning the point is that what happens is that Netherlands has always been an international economy. It has always spread its wings. I mean, we're talking since colonial times. It has always acted globally, but thought in local terms. And now if you look at the recent documents like Green Deal, it talks, if you do a search for European values, it is across board. And when I ask, what do we mean by European values? Is it distinct from human rights values? Are there no universal values that we can resonate with? Is it distinct from that? It is very hard to define that. So, we have to be very careful about being truly local and what are the implications of that. And now the last question, which I was asked and getting even closer, and I will wrap up with that, is that we had a management meeting the other day at the university. And as some of you may be following, what's happening is that obviously, because of the pandemic, productivity has hit a really massive low, right? Particularly amongst some demographics, not on all. Some people have been very hyper productive if they don't have children. If they're not women who are responsible, often the care work has been disproportionately fallen on the shoulders of women academics in this case. If you are having mental health issues, if you are single and lonely, there's a whole variety of reasons why you don't and you weren't productive last year. And instead, so for the meeting, as a way to sort of mobilize the team, the management decided it would be a good idea to invest in a company to visualize the productivity of last year against each other, against all the colleagues in this beautiful visualization map where names, it was like basically productivity shaming, where names of big bubbles popped up and how you were linked with that. And then the loser tiny bubbles were already marginalized, which basically amplified already existing situations of who were the winners and losers of the pandemic last year. And then what was even more astounding was an immediate reaction came from the PhDs and the precarious, like non-tenure faculty. Not very few top faculty said a word, and they've actually lashed out. And I really respected that. And I realized there's so much courage in this young generation, but also there's such a tone deafness from the top level where you ask the wrong question in return. You basically translate this to being that it is still about productivity mattering, even in the name of well-being, right? And so I just want to end with, obviously, it does matter the kind of questions you ask, because it sets upon a number of things. That it makes it seem like certain assumptions can be held dear, which is often false. It actually writes a history that may not be true, and it chalks a pathway for the future where energies are drawn. And if we get that wrong, we would waste a tremendous amount of potential. And last but not least is we do need to sideline like-mindedness. I do see that there's this need for, okay, we need to have like-mindedness. No, it's really not relevant, because if we try to do like-mindedness, we will not get anywhere. What we need to do is, can we come up with common goals which are driven for the well-being of all? And, if you see what the donut economy is talking about, regenerativeness, redistribution, resiliencies, that would resonate with many people, regardless of their differences and whether they agree with each other or not, especially in these polarizing times. So in this effort for this hub to take off, I hope you strive to reach out to people who will probably be, in strong disagreement maybe with each other, and to foster that kind of debate and chemistry and leverage on that for momentum and action. And with that, I'll stop and I will hand the stage to Connor.
Thanks so much, Payal. Really interesting. So many points that you brought up. I thought I was going to mark down one or two things to follow up with you on, but I've got about 6. I don't think I'll be able to bring up all of these. Before I bring up any of them, I want to say, my voice here is much less important than the voices of the people who are attending the event. So I would love to take some questions from you. If you could please put your questions in chat. On anything that Payal just covered, I would love to, I'll just pull them from chat. I've got my trusty, phone here that I'm watching chat, so I'll pull some questions and ask. While people ask their questions, Payal, I've got to choose just one. I love this concept of productivity shaming, and I want to talk to you about resilience. The thing that really caught my ear was this balance between local and global that you talked about, especially on the Netherlands perspective. I found that, really quite interesting, and that you want to sort of disagree with sort of the consensus on how this should be. And I want to dive into this a little deeper with you. Your perspective is that in the Netherlands, we need to be acting more globally as opposed to thinking globally, disassociate ourselves with, or as Dutch organizations, to kind of move away from only acting in the local or national self-interest. Can you dive into that a bit? Have I summarized it correctly? And
Yes,
what concrete advice would you give to a Dutch NGO that's listening about how to operationalize this? What can they do tomorrow?
So again, it's about the wrong framing, right? Because actually, when they talk about think global, which is what the mayor says, right? Think global, act local. There's an assumption that you can act local, right? And you should act local. Firstly, the Dutch have always acted globally. If you have a multinational company, if you're vying for international clients, you are acting globally. If you have colonized, you have acted globally. If there's post-colonial infrastructures and relationships that you are continuing, you're continuing to act globally, right? And when you think locally, then you are being a non-listener. You're not listening to the markets, to the organizations that exist around the world, and you're not listening to them in a critical manner, which will allow you to be responsible so you can act responsibly towards these societies. So what to me has been very frustrating, and companies have been pressured to say, how do we act global? And it's more of a rhetoric and more of a facade, right? Because we think we can contain Europe as if it needs to be still the fortress Europe. And yet we have a sort of schizophrenia because we so very much want to be still the global leaders and partner with the world, because that is the history of the Netherlands. So you can't have it both ways. And there is, at the fundamentals, is that there's a need to take responsibility about your actions globally, from global supply chains to, you can't talk about being ethical at the local level when you have your productions and you're mining in one country and you're exploiting labor in another country and forcing many other countries to abide by some sort of abstract European values, right? So yeah, so I think this is the hypocrisies need to be, very much on the surface, and we should stop pretending we are not in as a global collaboration, because if anything, the COVID has taught us is that any of the major problems we face today has to be done in action and thought in a global manner, right? Whether it's a climate crisis, whether it's financial reform, whether it's data regulations, think about it. Which particular industry does not demand a global collaboration? And we've seen what can happen with the pandemic and the vaccinations, right? Because of this collaboration, we have resulted in this extraordinary, unprecedented innovation of vaccinations in such a short time. So imagine if we could apply the same kind of energy to the climate change, to financial reform. How amazing would that be, right?
With you, I get it. And there's a lot of wisdom, I think, to pull out there. I'm so glad you're here to share that, because I think there's many perspectives in there that I think many of our attendees can put in place right away. So thanks, Payal. We are a bit overwhelmed with questions coming in through chat. The first one is from Deborah Allen Rogers, and thanks, Deborah, because this is the point that I wanted to get to second. You mentioned shame as a concept and using shame as a way of moving organizations in a different direction that they had been operating in before. Deborah's question is, can you speak more about navigating through the shame scenario, and how do you redirect the flow? Do you get what Deborah is asking there? And can you weigh in more on that as a mechanism?
Yeah, actually, it was interesting because I'm sure multiple people will resonate. At some point, I become rather cynical. As you go through the whole tenure track system in the Netherlands, you realize academia has become so neoliberal, and it's all about the publish or perish, and to a point which has become completely ridiculous. We're not doing replication studies, for example. Knowledge is suffering because we are constantly in the metrics of quantification of knowledge and not quality, right? But I reached this level of cynicism. So when the visualization, the perversity of the visualization productivity is shown, I was kind of tuned out. My brain was, there it goes again. And I was actually shamed in myself by by the young colleagues who were the first to speak out. It should have been me to speak make the first comments, because I had reached a point of cynicism, whereas they didn't, even though they are in the most precarious positions, and they reverted it through their collective voice and shamed the management who started to stumble on the tools that they were celebrating as a way to empower them. So I think that's the beauty of collective action is it can be pretty forceful also on Zoom when you have all these faces, throwing these ideas and tearing it apart in very, articulate and very rational ways, actually, without apologizing. So I think that is definitely a pathway, right? Is to move away from cynicism. And it's something we have to all fight against because I see myself as an inherent optimist. But even I have fallen, we all fall through these cracks and we need to continuously work on that.
Thanks, Payal. Yeah, I think that answers a couple of the questions that came in through chat. There's a bunch more. So we only have a few more minutes, Payal. So now I'm going to give you insanely complicated and difficult questions to ask and ask for you 60 seconds, weigh in. We're going to try and get through as many of these as possible. I want to start with Ioana, who asked the most recent question, actually, about how COVID-19 changed the way we perceive productivity, and especially in terms of work-life balance, especially when it comes to women's roles in our society. Your perspective on this?
Well, there's definitely a lot of attention to it. I mean, care work, people are actually talking about legitimate restructuring of the future work in terms of care economies. And I would love to see that followed up because there's a difference between rhetoric and action.
Absolutely. So a couple questions about sort of organizational approaches. Felix asks about identifying talent past qualifiers like a degree or slick CVs. I mean, obviously there's these concepts of blind CVs. What have you seen actually working for organizations, not just to diversify, but to get the right talent that they need in the right positions to tackle the relevant work?
Yeah, I think I would definitely drop degrees completely. And this is sort of ironic coming from, an academic, because I myself happen to get these degrees. I mean, in fact, my letter of recommendation for Harvard University happened to be my boss who was sitting on that board. And it was all totally by chance because I looked like an ex-girlfriend of his. So I'm just telling you the way it's like, everyone's like, oh my gosh, she got into Harvard, but I understand how I also got it. Not that I'm taking away my merit, but what I mean is drop degrees and focus on problem solving, like creative solving. Look at your hiring as part of a team. And do you have the creative? Do you have the analytic? And shape your exercise and you'll be surprised and open it up, right?
I appreciate that. And since you ended on a note talking about managing teams, I'm going to go to Jill's question about how to enable leaders to really listen and pay attention. Jill's point is often management is not listening to employees or not paying attention, or perhaps if I can add, Jill, I would maybe say they think that they're paying attention, but perhaps not as much. How shall we enable leaders? Like if somebody's sitting in this room that is not at the lead of their organization, how do they take this idea back to their organization and force the change upwards?
I think I don't care whether leaders listen or not, actually, because frankly, when you're in that position of leadership, you have very little incentive to make change. Like if you look at the rotting system of academia, right? I mean, if anything, one has to do it bottom up, is to restructure incentives, restructure the system in a way where it is not up to leaders to make these kinds of care-based decisions. Because take some power away from them where we're not dependent on whether leaders care or not, whether it's on a political level, whether it is an academic or an organizational. We need to reduce their power and make it much more accountable. And that happens by actual concrete structures, incentives, which are more geared towards a much more empathetic, care-based sort of economy.
Well, I appreciate you. I don't know how you managed to keep your answers short to these, because these are ones that I know you and I maybe could both talk about for an hour. But we have this wonderful group of people sitting here. So Payal, I have to say thank you so much for the wisdom, for the perspectives that you bring to this, for the dialogue that you can have with our audience. And thanks to everybody for asking your questions. I'm so sorry I didn't have the time to get to all of them. We're going to move on. Payal, we're going to get back to you in a little bit as I ask for some of your reactions for the folks that we have in the room. So thanks so much, Payal Aurora, for joining us.
Thank you. Looking forward.
So next we want to move on to a dialogue here in the room, which is something that I think, at least I've been missing as somebody that has been doing a lot of Zoom events and things on, everybody needing to unmute your microphone and make sure your spouse is not walking around behind you as you do your presentation. It's nice to be here in person. And I'm so happy to be joined here by three very brilliant people that we're going to hear from one by one. And we wanted to give Hague-based organizations a chance to give a perspective a little bit on how your organization has been faring in these last couple of years, what learnings you might be able to give our audience, what have you struggled with, and sort of going back to this idea of touching base a little bit, telling us a little bit about what this might mean for you over this last year. So very first off, we're happy to be joined by Monica C. Monica C is a member of the Advisory Council on the International Affairs, on International Affairs of the government, and is also, of course, with the Klingendael Institute. We're so happy that you've joined us, Monica. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Connor. And I wanted to continue on the connection that Payal made between the global and the local, and also her plea to go beyond like-mindedness, because that inspired me. And I wanted to focus my intervention on 2 points. That is to say, how can we connect to the citizens of The Hague? How can we connect the international turbulence that is at the center of this dialogue to what the people in The Hague are experiencing in their daily lives? And secondly, the question how the institutions that are part of this ecosystem of the Hague as a city of peace, security and justice can play a role to bridge the gap between those experiences and policies, because policies need to become more inclusive. Also when there are global policies like Payal indicated. If you want to act globally, legitimately, then you need to have inclusive policies that are responsive to the daily life experiences of The Hague citizens. And to start with the first point, how can, what do the international turbulent development mean for the daily lives of the citizens? And how can we make policies more responsive to their experiences? I'm concerned because you see that the representative function of political parties gets thinner and thinner. So we need to find additional ways to make the connection between these daily lives and policies. And for instance, Klingendael did research into foreign intervention in diaspora in neighborhoods in big cities. So Turkish diaspora, for instance, or Iranian diaspora. And you have this image in the media that there's a one-on-one connection between Erdogan with his long arm, and one-on-one connecting to the Turkish diaspora in the Netherlands. But if you look into that, if you listen to these people, there are many among them who are the strongest opponents against this foreign intervention. And we don't know much about how these people think, these fellow citizens think. So if these people feel that they're not heard, they're very inclined to become societally pessimist. You also call that declinist. That means that people in The Hague get the feeling and that everything of value is going down. So everything they value in society is going down because of international turbulence, and that our politicians, our institutions do not have control and do not provide them with control over these trends. And if people don't feel heard, and this societal pessimism is one-on-one connected to susceptibility for populism. And that brings me to my second point. What can our institutions do to make this connection to the citizens in The Hague? Because we meet amongst each other, we study these international developments, but do we also connect to the citizens of The Hague? And I know that the College of the Mayor and the Aldermen really wants to focus on this connection between the international city of peace, security and justice and The Hague citizens. So it's also an appeal to our institutions to see how your specific institution could do that. And maybe to start with the Klingendael, to give a brief example, what we do is to do a representative survey among citizens in the Netherlands. So it's more than 23,000 people that we periodically interview. And that means that there are hundreds of people in The Hague that also fill out these questionnaires. So we know what they think about economic relations with China in a geopolitical context. We know what they think about foreign intervention in Turkish diaspora in the Netherlands. And what we have started doing is to discuss the outcomes of these surveys with the responsible minister. So you get a public conversation about the results of this survey between the responsible minister and these citizens. And you could bring this kind of international city conversation also to different neighborhoods in The Hague. And bring in the alderman, for instance, responsible for the international economic policies of The Hague, together with Minister, Saskia Bruines, and discuss about international policies with The Hague citizens. And what they think about the rise of China, for instance. And I know that there are many other institutions like Hill and The Hague, the Haagse Hogeschool, who are doing research already with The Hague citizens. And I think there's really a momentum to start sharing experiences in dialogues like these, how we do this, and to become better in reaching out to the citizens of The Hague. So thanks for bearing with me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Monica. There's really interesting things that I'm definitely going to draw back to, but I want to hear from everybody first, and then we'll see if you have questions for what Monica says, or if Monica, if you have questions for our other guests. So let's go on. I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Janne Nijman. Janne is the chairperson of the executive board and academic director of the Usher Institute. Janne, you're very welcome. I'll just note one quick thing. In Zoom chat, we are posting Monica, Janne, and eventually Michelle's more full bio. So if it seems like I'm giving it very surface level treatment, that's why. I want to get to what you have to say and not read CVs. So you can check in chat for the whole bio. Janne, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Connor. And just to echo, I think what Monica just brought to the table is very important. How our institutions love the dialogue with the citizens of The Hague on issues such, in our case, international law. So reaching out to young people in schools where, for instance, our institute works together with school children on international law, a similar initiative. But it's wonderful to emphasize the experience, I think, of the last year. And maybe that's also being inspired by Payal, who is a digital anthropologist. It's all about the experience. And my first comment would go to that, also thanking you for setting up this program in the way you did. Because before we had the wonderful lecture and this dialogue, we had breakout group. I met Serdar, I met Georgia, who we talked about how it was this last year. Serdar is a PhD candidate, student, working on his research, being hampered by the COVID situation. And I think the same is true for many of the students who are watching. I've been teaching, so I'm also teaching in Geneva. From my study, that's not what one wants to do. One wants to be in a classroom and right, interact, learn from the experience of the students and the PhD candidates there, and also in their research, Payal mentioned it, not being able to go to the archives, not being able to do the interviews one wants to do. But you set up the program wonderfully from the importance of the need to create a sense of community. And I think if Payal asks us or urges us to ask the right questions, one of my questions has been, what did we lose by going through to that virtual world that we've been living in? And obviously technology, and you're the one to talk to that with authority, not me, but technology has helped us, obviously. But we also lose something, and that's the personal interaction that I think we tried to have by starting in the breakout rooms. And there is a reason that there are all philosophies built on human connection, right? On looking each other in the eye, on that important. And we have had a year of looking past each other. When I talk to the team every now and then, like I'm sure we've all had, you look in that camera, not seeing eyes, right? So for me, that's an important point, the important personal touch that comes with looking people in the eye and a sense of community that we need, whether it's when we generate new knowledge, learn from each other and stage the dialogue. Now, where it comes to the work of the Institute, the Esser Institute is an institute for international European law. We've been working a lot on artificial intelligence in this last year, started a program on the military application of AI, but also invited an authority, Andrew Murray from LSE, to talk about the application of algorithms. And my question to the audience would be, and a question for us is what do you expect from the law? Because algorithm decision-making hands over decision-making to algorithms. We've seen the Syrie case here in the Netherlands. We've seen the child support situation here in the Netherlands. For a large part, the technology plays a role in there. And we've been looking to ethical codes to guide that discussion. I think it's also time to bring in international law, global legal discussions, and I think Payal also mentioned that. And I'm curious to learn from our audiences what they expect from the law. Now, I could also talk to the global and the local. I think what we might want to address is the whole smart city development. Cities. My own research also goes into cities and how they are representative actors at the global stage. But maybe in the context of digital disruptive technologies or digital technologies that support us, it's also interesting to think about what smart cities could bring, but also, again, in spirit inspired by Payal, what questions should we ask? Because it's something about the privatization of government. It's about power shifts that take place. So something that we should also be aware when we indeed talk about what are the needs of our citizens in cities, how can technology serve us there, but also realize what we're doing in whatever context we use technology, it has an effect on the power structures. Now, much more to talk. There's a lot, I was inspired by the breakout rooms and Payal, and I'm sure we can follow up later. So back to you, Colin.
Yeah, that I have to stop you without even talking about the power structures. I think, but if we get on that, I think we're going to go for a little while. So thanks. I'm already seeing some really interesting things between Jana, what you said, and Monica said. But I want to hear as well from Michelle Olmsted. We're really happy, Michelle, that you've managed to join us. We're welcoming Michelle, who is the director of the Center for Innovation at Leiden University. And once again, if you look in the chat, you can see Michelle's full bio. So Michelle, we'd love to hear from you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm going to focus on two things. One is innovation and the other is fearlessness. So I'm going to build on some of the previous comments and also Payal about first innovation, but then fearlessness. So we had a huge disruptive innovation, that was Corona. A lot of things happened in the digital world, especially in my staff and at the university, to accommodate for environments to build community in an innovative way in this Corona crisis. And community is also something that was mentioned by everyone here. And I think the community aspect of this is online, but also making meaningful in-person dialogue and connection. And the goal for us in this time at the Leiden University and the Center for Innovation was to make meaningful community online so that the in-person dialogue becomes even more meaningful. And how do you do that to make things safe for people? Because a lot of our focus in the past has been data responsibility and innovation methodology. And how do we ensure that if someone does walk behind you in the camera, it's okay, or if your cat or dog or baby crawls into the picture, that it's not the end of the world, that we can laugh about it and continue on with what's going on. So I think that those innovative things have really moved faster than we thought and faster than the law or policy can follow. And so we have so many things that we've learned in inclusiveness during this time, in globalization is not that far away. And that, yes, we may miss people next door, but also across the world. And we do have digital concepts that are getting better at making that more personal and not so vague. So I think there's so many things in innovation through an innovation life cycle that are happening now that we need to stop and think about. And a lot of the researchers that we work with are sort of looking at those things and how we've done well and how we haven't, actually, because there are things in inclusiveness at the beginning that were a problem. And those things came to us through audiences in PhD research and dissertations and hacking of things like Zoom, and how to make those environments safe for global audiences and our own views. So I'll stop the conversation now about innovation, but there's so much to talk about there. The next thing I want to talk about then is fearlessness, and I do know these things are connected. But I think we have to move past fear, and I saw so much fear and so much fear-mongering in this time that is unfortunate. And as politicians, as legal experts, as universities and researchers, we have to look at that and how do we help people move past that fear and become fearless, and then build the community of global actors. And that is the public-private partnerships that often people are afraid of, but are the way that we can help together, come together, create good ideas, establish boundaries as well, and create new ways to move our innovations in digitization forward in a way that's safe and positive for all of our global partners. So I know that's a bit brief, but I'm going to leave it there for now because I think we all have questions for each other and to how to continue this conversation after this meeting as well.
Sure. Thanks so much, Michelle. Monica, Jana, and Michelle as well. If you say you have questions, again, my voice is not the most valuable one here. So if anybody has a pressing question about something they heard that they want to jump in on, otherwise, I'm so happy you brought up fearlessness, because a big part of Jana and Monica, what you said was about in-person interaction. But I think as everybody on our group today would know, we've all been a part of organizations that have tried to have that in-person interaction, and the fear gets in the way, often rightfully so. You have to encourage safety, and you need to abide by the laws and regulations that you have at hand. But what has fearlessness meant for you in Klingendal and at Asser? How has fearlessness looked, and how has that played into your work? Maybe Monica, can you start us?
Yeah, maybe if you allow me to connect that concept of fearlessness, which I think is key in these times too, that idea of connecting international turbulence to what citizens experience. And for that, you need, in a way, to be fearless, to bring people together beyond like-mindedness, like Payal said, because you do not know what you can expect, like in these public conversations that we had, for instance, on how people feel that international developments affect their daily lives with Minister Blok. So we brought together deliberately people, higher educated, lower educated, people with a migration background or not, people of really very diverse. And then you do not know what you can expect. But what we got is that we got 50 people really super seriously tuning in on Zoom, doing their utter best to be a citizen, and because you expect that they will, you expect the best from them, and you get the best in a way. No, so it's about overcoming that fear, and then you in a way you receive what you. If you are fearless, and then you get this gift of citizenship. That struck me. So that was great, and it also struck me that many politicians have become, in a way, afraid of diverse groups to interact with. And Minister Blok was quite the opposite. He said, now that I have become a Minister of Foreign Affairs, I only discuss with experts and lawyers and the political scientists. I want to see a proper woningbouwcorporatie maas. So just bring me to the people. And he got rewarded for his fearlessness. Yeah, I like that.
How about you? You were about to say something, and then I tossed it to Monica. How about this concept of fearlessness for you?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that it evokes with me, but very much like, indeed, the idea that Monica expresses, right? You trust the audience and you receive a wonderful, respectful conversation beyond fear. And so that I think is wonderful to had to mark out that mechanism that we often in politics, we see the mechanisms of fear rather than putting trust in people. Now, at the Institute, a lot of our research has been around trust and trustworthiness. It's not just asking about trust, but it's also being trustworthy and making sure that organizations that have authority that are trustworthy and live up to certain standards. And maybe that ties in with what you're saying about public-private partnerships. I mean, not all partnerships are the same, right? So you have to have sort of standards that you appreciate as these partnerships live up to. Where it comes to even at a different level, it's a lot of, for instance, international law that's based on fear, that's based on distrust. And there, my personal fascination is how can we sort of deviate from that? Because then you're stuck in exactly the same mechanisms that Monica describes for the very, very local, but they function obviously at an international level. But I think what is encouraging is that everyone tried. Within our organizations, I think what I sense, and as, in any case, within the Esser Institute, there was an eagerness to not only reach out through that screen to the colleagues, but also engage with the world beyond. And one of the benefits, obviously, was that we had participants in the global south that didn't come to the Esser Institute when we had only in person. So also the ecosystem that we're all part of, that is in a way very, very local, and that's what we love. But it also expanded and got global proportions, which is also, again, something that helps us go beyond fear and makes things more inclusive and creating different values.
Michelle, have you found benefits in this as well? You talked about creating a meaningful online interaction so that it's more meaningful when you do manage to get in person. Have you found these benefits that we're hearing from Jana as well about more inclusive events, or how has that struck you?
Yeah, so our events and our work has reached a lot more people than it ever did before, but we also did podcasts, of course, Zoom and other kinds of conferences, and about productivity. Wow, I'm amazed at all of our energy in probably each of our organizations. People just put so much energy, regardless if they were also having a baby next to them or having problems with their cat or dog or other family members or caretaking of elders. So I'm amazed at how many publications and blogs and articles that have been coming out of not just the Center for Innovation, but of course we did a lot of learning and failure during this and published all of it, because that fearlessness is also publishing your failures. And as I said in the beginning, inclusiveness was an issue, even for our own team, who's very diverse and had all kinds of reasons whether they wanted to be on camera or not for data responsibility and privacy concerns, especially students who are in rooms that are not what they would be proud of necessarily, or with other people in the room trying to also have their classes and dialogue. So we learned so much this year, and the partnerships that we made are bigger than we have been able to make in the past because of the numerous meetings that just go on all day long. But I also think that we learn it's okay to disagree with each other. It's harder to do online. And also sometimes easier. So that's sort of, you can hide, but also you can't. So those things are really phenomenal things we learned. But I think this academic debate has been revitalized in a way that is not about like-mindedness, as Paya said, but more about the reason and the why you are in an academic setting is that you can debate and not necessarily come out on the same conclusion. You go and then do your research based on what you formulated as a result of that discussion. So,
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, there's so many questions that I have been neglecting in our chat. So I'm gonna, but I have to say selfishly, because you guys can't see the chat, but I can. There's a really valuable chat going on here. I just want to pull a couple notes out and then I'll grab a question. Deborah Allen Rogers Mandela says he felt fear but chose to activate his courage. I just thought that was a really nice perspective to have on that fear. And as well, Betsy mentioning the idea of bold courage, fear being normal, but we can act courageously despite our fear. Fear provides information about the areas where it pays to be cautious. So some really, I think, brilliant thoughts in here. Michelle, there's some questions to you about the right to be forgotten. And since you touched on data and privacy concerns, for example, students not maybe being so proud of their physical surroundings as they're on a call. What have you seen about the right to be forgotten during the pandemic? Have our rights towards digital privacy advanced or receded, or a little bit of both?
it depends on which product and which service you're talking about. But for us in the Center for Innovation, we've been looking a lot about using this mechanism of consent about your data, that you as a person own your data, your face, your noise. And I think there's been a lot of advances on frameworks. We have developed one along with some of our humanitarian partners from the past to protect your data as yourself and remove it from places you want to remove it from. And I think we've learned a lot about that, and corporations have also been more conscientious about it. Of course, governments also hold a lot of data, and universities, and I think some ways we've come a very long way and allowed people to remove their sound or their video or their chat functions if they want to do that. But we have a lot further to go technology-wise to make that more as an active person, being able to request, or you also being able to take things down. I mean, I look at Facebook as one of the sort of very political conversations that we have for quite some time now about whether you can really delete your Facebook account. But that's one example.
Yeah. Jana?
Yeah, I think this is super important. I don't have a Facebook account. I never had, but I am very conscious about what you say about the students. So I realized I had to teach everything from Amsterdam to Geneva. I started to self-censor. I didn't do it, but I realized there was a risk, because at some point you know which questions you can get answered by which students and which not. In the room, it's not important, but you think, oh, it's recorded. I don't want them to have a particular, they have a day off. You don't want to have it registered that there is no answer coming. I mean, you have to be very, very sensitive when you start teaching what the consequences are when the recordings are somewhere out there. And I think all educational organizations should make sure that all these recordings are just deleted. And I hope that somehow the work you're doing is also related to that, because it's crucial for all students. So.
See so as well. Jana, while you have the mic, there are several questions to you about technology, and I hope you get the chance to check this chat, because now we have like 2 minutes left. So I'm going to do what I did with Payal, and I'm going to hit you with a hard question when we don't have long to answer it. But the dynamics between law and technology is brought up by Ayun, and as well, Vladimir mentions about algorithms and technological advancements impacting international law, especially in conflict zones. where military could also use these same algorithms that are being developed. So questions about the interplay between the technology and law. What sort of, let's say, oversight mechanisms, or should we somehow figure out a way to draw ourselves back from going too far in this technological advancement? I mean, you must get this question a lot as soon as you start talking about algorithms.
Exactly. No, and there's a lot to say. So I'm also working with PAX in a very voluntary way, and they would argue for a ban on all these applications, military applications of AI, and I think that also is a valid voice in this debate. Now, currently, what we're doing in a project called Dilemma at the Asser Institute is looking if and how in the military application of artificial intelligence or other new emerging technologies, international humanitarian law can be designed in these technological applications. Because obviously in military contexts, in conflict zones, international humanitarian law and human rights should apply. But what happens when the human agent is supported, let's say, supported by these technologies? I think that there's a lot of discussion about fully autonomous weapons. That's where we aren't yet, but we're at this stage that a lot of decision making in these conflict situations are supported by algorithms. I mean, that's something huge, right? That there are actually machines involved when humans start killing. And there are extremely interesting voices like Mary Ellen O'Connor and O'Connell and others who would say that's already something that violates human dignity. And there are others that say, okay, well, we see that this cannot be avoided already in the army. These technologies are used, but then how do we use them? And shouldn't law make sure that they are used in a particular way? And so I'm not, for all technical questions, I have to refer to Michel. My own field is more related to the history and theory of international law. And what we see in the past, that tools from the hammer to today can always be used in various ways. And law can play a role in making it good or bad. But as Michel is rightly saying, law is behind. So there's a lot of work to do there.
What should the people of the Netherlands say about this? I mean, the research you've been doing with the Klingendahl Institute, do people bring up these more complex topics like algorithms and predictive lawmaking or predictive decision-making or machines controlling killing? Is this a topic that comes up in some of Klingendahl's research?
Now, what you do see is that people feel that there is something between the free and open internet that we have celebrated, and on the other hand, China, how China is dealing in the internet, and that they want some common good, a definition of that in terms of privacy, in terms of safety, control, human control over these techniques that needs to be embedded in law. And I find that awareness, that's relatively recent, I think at societal level, and it has been accelerated because of the COVID pandemic. So yes, it pops up. People are aware that something very strong is going on, and that we need to, as a community, define what is of value here and what we want to avoid, and of course define practices, but also law to regulate it. So
Yeah, a really fascinating conversation that I know, like, once we shut off the video, we're just going to keep chatting, right? Okay, is that okay? Great. Sorry, everybody. I'm just going to keep them to myself and to everybody here to keep the conversation going. Monica C., Michelle Olmsted, Jana Nijman, thank you so much for joining. I think there's so many interesting points. I just want to check in with Payal. Payal, you've been listening. Are we talking about the right subjects here? Are we bringing up the right concepts? We mentioned that you have inspired us with some of your key insights there. What do you think after listening to this conversation? I'm curious.
I think, thank you. Firstly, it's like this has been such an amazing follow up. I almost got lost into this that I forgot I was supposed to get on. But I think these are really valuable insights. And I would just like pose a question to you all. Obviously, this is not going to be answered right now, but from the comments and what you were saying, it seems like we are constantly trying to decide which is better or which is the right direction. But in this notion of like, so should it really be about online or offline? And what is lost, what is gained? Is fearlessness the driver, or is it fear? Or it's like we're still doing this sort of a binary sort of approach, right? About where in the end, it is all about choices. Do we have the choices? Because when we put these into context, the fearlessness or fear or the idea of the value of in-person sort of association could be very much higher for one person who is probably much more enabled than say someone who's disabled or who's shy, or so it's such a personalized, such a contextual understanding that we do need to see problems in terms of complexity in its richness, right, where contradiction can coexist. And I think one of the things that I'm grappling with is what exactly of the normal, that when we say let's go back to normal, what of the normal do we really want to keep, and what really should be changed? And I think all of you have spoken really well about it, because you've seen certain real opportunities that have arisen in times of crisis. And can we push that to really sort of discarding some of these sort of corrosive, toxic cultures, structures, disincentives, and create at least use this as a real disruptor? We love that word. Can we actually now, I mean, we all can agree on one thing: COVID has been a disruptor, a massive global disruptor. And I really hope we don't go back to normal in that sense, right? Because that would be such an opportunity loss. So, yeah.
Thanks, Payal. Yeah, I hope so too. And I think if we can continue conversations like this afterwards, then at least I think we stand a good shot, because I think if the four of you are sitting in a room together, I think there's just about nothing you can't accomplish. So I'm glad to hear from you, and thanks for your insights throughout the event, Payal. We're going to close up here, but I want to turn to two good friends, Jill Wilkinson, the Managing Director of the Hague Humanity Hub, and my good old friend Wim, who is, of course, the Director of International Affairs at the City of The Hague. Wim, give us your thoughts first. You've been observing, listening in silently in the back. What are your thoughts about this event? What's next here in the City of The Hague for this community? And what are your thoughts listening into the conversation?
I'm just especially very proud, because I think what we are trying to build as a municipality here in The Hague is an ecosystem that not only makes the City of The Hague more interesting, but also fosters a community that can help in building a better world. And that to a large extent depends also on vision and on knowledge. And I think the theme was powerful women, and we've seen that, but we've also seen that the organizations that they stand for are, I see a lot of women now giving thumbs up. The organizations they stand for are really very valuable and contribute to this ecosystem and to a better world. And I'm just very proud to see that happening. The next step, if you ask that, is to make that more effective. And that's what Jill and I are going to talk about very shortly now, but also to bring that to the citizens of The Hague. And Monica mentioned this already in the beginning of her introduction, but if I can, together with Jill and people like Monica, do one thing the next few years, it would be, and that's also something I know my boss Saskia Bruines and my mayor, Jan van Zanen, want very much, is to bring that to the citizens and to make them not only aware of how important this is, but also to have them benefit from this and benefiting from this knowledge available in The Hague. That would be something that I would cherish if that would be possible. And I think we will going to do that.
Possible, Jill.
Yeah, of course it's possible. It's been so exciting to be building this community for the last 3.5 years. And we see it time and time again, and we saw it again today, that when we give people the opportunity to get together and share knowledge across different sectors, but all working towards a more peaceful and just world, you take the opportunity, you come, you have these conversations, we create the openness, and you engage, and it's fantastic. So I'm so excited that we can keep this going, because this is something we've been developing over the last few years. And what I really am excited to do right now is announce that this is the beginning of a series So we want to have this 3 or 4 times a year, a Peace and Justice Cafe, where we give you the opportunity to get together, have a dialogue, be inspired by each other, share your work, and find ways to accelerate and have more impact as time goes on. So the next one is going to be on October 26th. And I want to say thank you to the municipality because they're the ones who make this possible. This is a really great partnership. And as you heard from Wim already, we have desired to go further than the cross-sectoral collaboration and extend this to the public. So lots of things coming up there. And yeah, just keep engaging with us and watch this space.
Thanks so much, Jill. Thanks, Wim. And what great news. I think one of the nice things was seeing just how fast this filled up with 100 people that are all, I mean, as I look behind me, I see so many cameras on. I see so many people engaged, smiling, thumbs up. Yeah, and so if we can continue that, then I think, well, like I was saying to Payal, there's sky's the limit in terms of how we can apply this and how people can get involved. So really exciting.
Jill and I had a few workshops over the last few years asking the people in our ecosystem what they need from us. And the main thing was be a platform that connects people in The Hague and make us a better community. And I think we'll be able to do that. It's great to see that happening also live.
Thanks to all of the contributors and all the participants who enjoyed the conversations. Thanks for you to bringing it all together as our moderator, Connor. I think it's been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the next one already.
Well, that makes at least 2 of us. So thanks everybody for joining us here at the first installment, happy to say, of the Peace and Justice Cafe here at the Humanity Hub in Den Haag. We're so glad that you've joined us. A big thanks to our guests and our speakers, to Monica, to Jana, to Payal, to Michelle, to Wim, and Jill, and as well to all of the 9 moderators and facilitators of the special community groups earlier. I didn't get to join many of them, but I heard that they went great. I saw some of the screenshots of people staying in touch. And thanks to all of you who made the networking sessions really great and interesting. I want to now individually find out the interesting thing that you found out about everybody else, but we don't have time. So we're going to have to try and design the Peace and Justice Cafe in October in a way that you can share all those interesting tidbits. So we're going to close the event now. And for those of you who want to head out, that's totally fine. Send a little message in chat saying, bye, everybody, and we'll see you next time. We are going to do one little cheeky thing, which is what we found in February when we did the NGO reception here at The Hague, Humanity Hub, is that some people really liked this 3-person networking room thing, that it was a cool chance to meet some new people, connect across different ideas. So what we're going to do in about 2 minutes, I'm giving you now the 2-minute warning, is I'm going to start giving Lotte some heart palpitations again, and we're gonna divvy everybody up in rooms of 4 so that you have a chance to chat with some new people, meet some old friends again. Who knows who you're gonna get?